Governor's daughter eloped with a ranch hand. Her farewell letter made her mother faint. The morning sun poured through the lace curtains like a silent witness, spilling pale gold across the governor's mahogany desk. It was supposed to be an ordinary day, a day of meetings, signatures, and endless talk of railroads in progress. Yet, on that desk where contracts and laws were usually stacked in neat order, there lay a single letter, small and fragile, but powerful enough to shatter an entire world. Governor William Harrison entered his study with the steady rhythm of a man used to control. His boots echoed against the polished floor, his china cup rattling faintly in his hand. But before he even saw the handwriting, before he even touched the paper, something in the air told him that life would never again be the same. He knew those loops of ink, that precise, delicate script, Elizabeth's, his daughter, his jewel, his carefully raised young lady. The girl who was supposed to wear silks, not dust, pearls, not rope. His throat tightened as he unfolded the page, and with each word his heart sank, the way a stone vanishes into black water. She was gone. Gone with Miguel Santos, the quiet ranch hand who had mended fences in silence, who had worked with calloused hands and steady eyes, and who, without permission, had somehow stolen the governor's daughter. Her words burned like fire on the paper. She could not live a life of golden chains. She would not marry Thomas Whitmore, heir to a banking fortune. She would rather chase freedom on a dusty trail than choke inside a silk-draped prison. She wrote of Miguel's kindness, of his honesty, of how he saw her, not as a governor's daughter, not as a trophy, but as herself. William's powerful hand shook as if he were a child. 23 years of building, of protecting, of climbing the ladders of power and wealth, all swept away by ink on paper. His Elizabeth would rather ride into an uncertain desert with a ranch hand than sit upon the throne he had carved for her in society. When Martha entered, her voice still sweet from morning softness, she was carrying dreams of a wedding gown fitting and breakfast chatter. But her husband's silence, his pale face, his trembling grip on the letter, those things stole the air from her chest before she even read the words. And when she did read them, her body broke beneath the weight. She crumpled against the doorframe, whispering no, not with him, as if repeating it could undo it. Her fears spilled at once. What would people say? What of Thomas Whitmore? Of the wedding invitations already sent? Of the newspapers eager to praise their union? But William hardly heard her. His ears rang with his own failures, with questions that stabbed deep. Had he been blind? Had his daughter's heart been given away under his very roof, while he was too busy tending to politics and appearances to notice? Elizabeth's words echoed in his head. What good is a golden cage, Papa? I want to be free. I want to love. Martha sat broken across from him, her face drained of life. She clutched the letter as if she could squeeze her daughter back through the words. But William's gaze hardened as it fixed on the purple mountains beyond the window. Somewhere beyond those ridges, his daughter rode with the ranch hand he had dismissed as ordinary, unworthy, invisible. The governor's voice, when it came, was heavy as stone. We will find her. We will bring her back before this madness destroys everything. But even as he spoke, a doubt gnawed at him. Maybe it wasn't Elizabeth who was blind with foolishness. Maybe it was him, the father who had thought he could build happiness out of wealth, power, and reputation. And out there, under the rising sun, Elizabeth's trail of dust stretched southward, toward love, toward ruin, toward a freedom that no governor's decree could ever chain. The horse's hooves pounded against the hard desert earth, each strike a steady drumbeat that seemed to echo Elizabeth's racing heart. Behind her, the great white house with its proud columns shrank with every mile, until it was nothing but a faint memory swallowed by dust. The life she had known, polished silver, glittering chandeliers, dresses pressed to perfection, was vanishing behind her like a dream fading at dawn. Ahead stretched only the raw horizon, wild and unforgiving, but also alive with the promise of freedom. Elizabeth had never ridden like this before. The wind tore her carefully pinned hair loose, pulling dark strands across her flushed face. She no longer looked like the polished daughter of a governor, the girl who was meant to marry into wealth. She looked like someone running toward her fate with wild determination. And beside her rode Miguel, his posture steady, his brown hands strong on the reins of his paint horse. He kept glancing back, his dark eyes sharp, scanning the trail as if expecting shadows to appear out of the rising dust. Elizabeth had never noticed this side of him. The quiet watchfulness, the instinctive caution of a man who knew that freedom came at cost, that safety was never given but earned with vigilance. Her silk dress, so fine and admired just yesterday at the garden party, was already in ruins. The hem was caked with dirt, torn where thorny mesquite branches had ripped through. A jagged tear at the sleeve revealed her undergarments, a sight that would have scandalized her mother. Sweat dampened the delicate fabric, clinging to her skin in ways no lady was ever meant to be seen. Yet for the first time in her life, Elizabeth did not feel ashamed of imperfection. The dirt and sweat marked her as part of the living world, no longer an ornament to be displayed, but a woman carving her own path. When Miguel finally raised his hand, signaling a stop, Elizabeth nearly wept with relief. Her body ached in places she had never known could ache from riding so hard. He guided them into a dip in the land, where once a creek had run, but now only dry sand and scattered stones remained. Cottonwoods clung stubbornly to the edges, their whispering leaves speaking secrets in the hot wind. Miguel dismounted and offered his hands to her. He lifted her down gently, his calloused palms careful at her waist, as if he feared she might shatter like glass. "We can rest here," he said softly, his voice carrying the lilting accent that had always made her listen a little more closely whenever he spoke. Elizabeth sank onto a fallen log, her chest heaving as she tried to catch her breath. Miguel led the horses to the dry bed, kneeling to dig with his bare hands until he struck damp earth. Patiently, he worked until a shallow pool formed, enough for the animals to lower their heads and drink. Elizabeth watched him, sweat streaking his brow, his muscles taut with effort. He was not a man of words or gestures designed for society's approval. Everything he did was simple, practical, but carried with it a care that spoke louder than declarations. When he returned, he handed her his metal canteen. "Drink slow," he murmured. The water was warm, flavored with sand and metal, so unlike the sweet well water she had grown up with. Yet as it touched her lips, she felt as though she were tasting life itself, raw, real, unpolished. Her fingers brushed his as she handed it back, the moment small and fleeting yet heavy with meaning. Miguel settled beside her on the log, his nearness carrying the scent of leather, horse, and sweat, scents that seemed more honest to her now than any perfume. He looked at her, his gaze both searching and uncertain. "Are you sorry?" he asked. Elizabeth followed his eyes to her torn dress, her tangled hair, the endless desert stretching in every direction. At that very moment, she knew her parents would be discovering her empty bed, her farewell letter, her absence from breakfast. Her mother would be weeping. Her father would be storming with rage. Thomas Whitmore would soon stand humiliated, a groom without a bride. The weight of what she had done pressed heavily upon her. But as she turned back to Miguel, she felt her heart speak with clarity. "No," she said firmly, "I'm not sorry." Miguel's lips curved into the first true smile she had seen from him all day. It was a smile that softened his guarded features, showing the warmth that lived beneath his watchful silence. His eyes crinkled in a way she had only glimpsed when he shared laughter with the other ranch hands. That smile was hers now, born from her choice to ride with him. He reached out suddenly, fingers brushing against her tangled hair. "You have something," he murmured. Carefully, he plucked a small yellow bloom from where it had caught in her dark strands during their ride. For a moment, he simply studied the fragile flower against the calloused pads of his fingers. Instead of discarding it, he began to weave it back into her hair. "My grandmother used to do this," he said softly, his voice threaded with memory. She believed flowers in a woman's hair were a prayer for happiness. Elizabeth closed her eyes and allowed him to finish. His fingers were roughened by years of labor, yet his touch was gentle, more tender than any she had ever known. Her hair had always been brushed, twisted, pinned into elaborate shapes by servants, but never had it been touched with such quiet reverence. When he was done, she felt transformed, not the governor's daughter, not a bride to be traded into society, but a woman claimed by love, dust, and freedom. But Miguel's hand stilled suddenly. His gaze shifted northward, his eyes narrowing. Elizabeth followed his line of sight and felt her breath catch. On the horizon, faint but unmistakable, a plume of dust was rising, moving fast, carried by the thunder of hooves. "How many?" she whispered. Miguel's jaw tightened. "5, maybe 6 riders. Your father's men." Elizabeth's stomach dropped like a stone. She had known they would come, but she had prayed for more time. Time to reach the border, time to slip beyond their grasp. Now the danger was already upon them. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice trembling. Miguel moved with sharp purpose, checking the horses, tightening straps on the bundles they carried. "We run," he said grimly, "and we pray our horses are stronger than theirs." Yet Elizabeth saw something in his expression that chilled her. Beneath his determination was a shadow of knowledge, an understanding that running might not be enough. These were no random pursuers. They were men loyal to her father, armed, relentless, and unwilling to return empty-handed. "Miguel," she whispered, her throat dry with fear. "What happens if they catch us?" He stilled, meeting her eyes. For a long moment, he simply looked at her as though committing her face to memory. "They will take you home," he said quietly, "and they will make certain I never trouble you again." The unsaid truth hung heavy in the air. If caught, Miguel would not live to see another dawn. Her father's power was law enough, and Miguel was only a ranch hand who had dared to love above his station. Elizabeth's fear hardened into resolve. "Then we cannot let them catch us," she said. Miguel gave a small nod, though his eyes betrayed the burden he carried. From his saddlebag, he pulled a cloth-wrapped bundle. Unfolding it, he revealed the dull gleam of metal, a pistol, small but deadly. "Do you know how to use this?" he asked. Elizabeth shook her head. No lady had ever been taught such things. She had been trained to play piano, to paint watercolors, to pour tea with grace, but never to hold death in her hands. Miguel placed the weapon in her palm, his rough hands covering hers as he guided her fingers into position. "Pull the hammer back. Steady your grip. Squeeze the trigger. Never jerk it." His voice was calm, but his eyes carried urgency. "I pray you never need it. But if we are parted, if I fall, you must know how to protect yourself." The gun felt heavy, alien, its weight pressing against her palm with a power she did not want yet could not refuse. For the first time, she felt a sharp edge of control, terrifying, yet empowering. "I do not want to hurt anyone," she whispered. "Neither do I," Miguel said, his voice heavy. "But sometimes the world leaves us no gentle choices." The dust plume grew larger now. Elizabeth could make out shapes, riders, horses, determined figures charging across the desert. Her father's was thundering toward her, relentless as the sun overhead. Miguel boosted her back on her mare, his touch lingering on her hands a heartbeat longer. His eyes locked on hers, dark and fierce. "Whatever happens, remember this. You chose love over fear. Freedom over safety. They cannot take that from you." Elizabeth tucked the pistol into the folds of her torn silk dress, the weight of it strange against her hip. The horses surged forward, carrying them away from the creek bed, away from the fragile piece of cottonwoods and whispered flowers. Ahead stretched the vast, unknown desert, unmarked and merciless. Behind, dust clouds swelled with pursuit. The sun climbed higher, burning down upon them. But inside Elizabeth, something colder settled. Not panic, but the clear understanding that her choice was now a trial. Love would be tested not by poetry or dreams, but by the hard edges of pursuit, danger, and sacrifice. And as the pounding of their horses merged with the echoing thunder behind, Elizabeth knew this was only the beginning. Dust and dreams were colliding, and the cost of love was about to be reckoned in blood. The canyon walls rose around them like the ribs of some ancient beast, painted in fire by the last breath of the sun. Elizabeth's mare stumbled over loose rock, and her heart sank with the sound of iron hooves clattering against stone. They could run no further. Behind them stretched the narrow, twisting passage that had carried them this far, the desert floor already fading into shadow. Ahead lay a sheer wall of stone, too steep for horses, too high for hope. The world had conspired to hem them in, and now the trap was sprung. Miguel reined his paint horse to a halt, scanning the walls with eyes that seemed carved from patience and resolve. He didn't speak right away. He didn't need to. Elizabeth read the truth in the stillness of his face, in the way his shoulders sagged with acceptance. This place, these walls, would be the stage for their ending, whether it came in blood, surrender, or something neither of them yet dared imagine. "Get down," he said quietly, his voice steady despite the storm swirling around them. "Let the horses rest." Her legs trembled as she slid from her saddle. Hours of desperate riding had burned every muscle to ash, and her silk gown, once the pride of her father's house, hung in tatters. The torn hem caught on the stirrup, ripping further as she stumbled free. She no longer looked like a governor's daughter. Her hair spilled loose, dusty and tangled, with the wilted flowers Miguel had woven into it clinging stubbornly, as if refusing to give up on beauty. Sunburn reddened her cheeks, thorns had scratched her hands raw, and yet, for the first time, Elizabeth felt entirely herself. Then came the sound she dreaded, echoing through the canyon like a funeral march. Hoofbeats, steady and deliberate. No longer the frantic pursuit of hunters, but the measured procession of men who knew their quarry had nowhere left to run. Miguel checked his rifle, but instead of aiming, he leaned it against a boulder and walked to her. His rough hands found hers, his calluses pressed against her soft skin, two worlds colliding in one fragile grasp. "Whatever happens," he said, eyes dark and unflinching, "these hours with you have been worth a lifetime." Before she could answer, the riders emerged. 5 figures on horseback filled the canyon's mouth, their silhouettes black against the fading glow. Leading them was a man she knew before her eyes confirmed it, Governor William Harrison, her father. He sat tall despite the long ride, his gray hair neat beneath his hat, his clothes immaculate, untouched by dust. Yet his face bore new lines carved by worry and betrayal, lines she had not seen when she kissed him goodbye 2 mornings ago. The others spread out behind him like a jury prepared to pass sentence. Sheriff Walker, badge gleaming in the low light. Deputy Morrison, who had once tipped his hat to her with boyish respect every Sunday at church. And 3 ranch hands from her father's own estate. Men who had shared meals with Miguel, laughed with him after long days of labor. Men who now looked at him with eyes as cold and unyielding as the canyon stone. Governor Harrison dismounted, slow and deliberate, carrying not just his years, but the authority of his office, of society itself, of the world Elizabeth had abandoned. When he straightened, he seemed taller, his shadow stretching long in the last rays of sun. "Elizabeth!" His voice filled the canyon, heavy not with rage, but with disappointment, so sharp it cut deeper than anger ever could. Come away from him. Come home. Miguel did not move. He did not reach for his pistol or stand braced for a fight. He simply remained at Elizabeth's side, the living embodiment of her choice. "I am home, Papa," Elizabeth said. To her own surprise, her voice held steady. "This is where I choose to be." Pain twisted his face, and for a moment she glimpsed the man who had once held her as a child, who had taught her to read, who had dreamed a grand life for her. But that man was buried beneath duty and fear. "He has poisoned you," he said. "Look at yourself. Look at what he has reduced you to in only 2 days." She lowered her gaze briefly to her torn dress, her dirt-streaked hands, her feet shoved into worn boots. But then she looked back at Miguel, the man who had taught her that love was not given like charity, but chosen fiercely against the odds. He has shown me who I really am. The sheriff's voice rang out. Miguel Santos, you are under arrest for kidnapping and corrupting a minor. I am no minor, Elizabeth cried, sharp and defiant. I'm 23 years old, and I came of my own will. Her father shook his head, grief and authority mingling in his eyes. You came foolishly. You are still my daughter, and I will not let you throw your life away on an infatuation. Miguel finally spoke, his voice calm, but carrying clear through the canyon air. Governor Harrison, I mean no disrespect. I know what I am. I have nothing to offer her but my love and my protection. But that love is true, and it asks nothing from her but to be herself. Her father drew his revolver, its polished steel catching the sunset's dying flame. Step away from my daughter. Step away, and maybe you live. Miguel's stance did not falter. I cannot do that, sir. Cannot, or will not. Both. The word lingered like smoke, filling the air with inevitability. Elizabeth felt the world contract into this moment, this collision of duty and love. Her heart thundered as she remembered the letter she had left on her father's desk. Words about golden cages and dusty freedom. Words seemed like fragile glass now, ready to shatter under the weight of guns and pride. Miguel, she whispered, please, let me talk to him. Just step aside. He turned to her, his eyes soft with the kind of sadness that came not from fear, but from acceptance. He had always known this day would come. If I step aside now, I step aside forever. And then I am not the man you chose. Her father's revolver never wavered. 10 seconds, he warned. Walk away into Mexico, and you may yet live. Stay, and face the consequences. Elizabeth's fingers brushed the hidden pistol tucked in her gown, the one Miguel had placed in her hands with careful guidance. The cold metal reminded her of choices made in fire and desperation. Papa, she pleaded, her voice trembling with both love and defiance. If you kill him, you kill the best part of me. Her father faltered, the gun shaking ever so slightly. Elizabeth, please, come home. Mary Thomas, take the life we planned. In time, this will all be just a foolish dream. And if I wake from this dream, she asked, what life is left to me? To be loved for my dowry, not my soul? To be caged by duty instead of freed by choice? That is not life, Papa. That is a slow death. The sun slid beneath the horizon, leaving only shadows and the first hints of night. Silence wrapped the canyon in its ancient embrace. The horses shifted uneasily, leather creaking beneath nervous riders. But all Elizabeth felt was the pull of her father's gaze, the stretch of a rope made of years and love and broken expectations. Miguel drew a deep breath, as if inhaling his final piece. I will not step aside. I will not betray the woman I love just to soothe a world that never saw her clearly. If I die tonight, I die as myself, and that is enough. Her father's finger tightened on the trigger. Elizabeth pulled her pistol free and aimed it, not at her father, not at Miguel, but at the earth between them. Her voice rang like thunder. Stop. All of you stop. Every gun shifted toward her. She stood in the center, dirt-streaked and flower-crowned, the embodiment of defiance. I'm not going back, she said with fire in her eyes. Not now. Not ever. That girl you raised, who lived in that house, who wore silks and obeyed. She is gone. She died the moment I chose love over duty. The canyon fell into breathless silence, stretched taut between father and daughter, two souls staring across a chasm carved from years of devotion and misunderstanding. Then came the sound Elizabeth would never forget. Not the crack of gunfire. Something softer. The clatter of steel as her father's revolver fell to the dust. In that single act, William Harrison aged before her eyes. His shoulders bent, his face ashen, the fight draining from him like water through cracked earth. He looked at his daughter, not as property, not as a plan, but as a woman who had chosen her own path. I have lost you, he whispered. Elizabeth lowered her pistol, tears burning her cheeks. No, Papa, you have found me. But even as she spoke, a shadow lingered in her chest, a haunting doubt. Could love survive the wreckage of shattered dreams? Or would the canyon's silence echo with their undoing long after the night had passed? The morning sun stretched its golden fingers across the adobe walls of the little house, bathing everything in a soft, forgiving light. Elizabeth knelt in her garden, her hands rough from years of honest work, yet gentle as they moved among the tomato vines. The dirt clung to her skin, and the sweat gathered along her brow, but these were not marks of burden. They were signs of a life chosen freely, one built with love, sacrifice, and quiet resilience. 5 years had passed since she left behind the mansion with its crystal chandeliers and suffocating expectations. Those years had carved new lines in her face, etched silver into her once dark hair, and hardened her palms with calluses, but they had also gifted her something far greater: peace. It was written in her eyes now, a calm steadiness that no wealth or privilege had ever given her. Behind her, the sound of children's laughter poured through the open windows, wrapping around her like music. Maria's high, lilting voice called out in both Spanish and English, the words tumbling together with the ease of a child who belonged to two worlds and felt wholly at home in both. Little William's giggles followed, warm and insistent, each one echoing the stubborn spirit of the grandfather he had never met. In the kitchen, Miguel's voice floated above it all, low and steady as he told the children a story while turning tortillas over the fire. Their home was modest, their life simple, but every brick of it was bound together by love. Elizabeth plucked ripe tomatoes from their vines and placed them gently in her basket, her mind already turning to the letter she planned to write that afternoon. Like the dozens hidden in the wooden box beneath her bed, it would be addressed to her mother. Letters full of little details: Maria's first steps, William's laughter, the taste of bread baked by her own hands. She wrote them as though speaking across a distance her heart could not bear, yet never found the courage to send them. Perhaps her mother would not care. Perhaps the governor's proud wife had no space for tales of kneading dough or patching clothes. Yet still Elizabeth wrote, because hope was a stubborn flame. "Mama, look!" Maria's voice pulled her back to the present. The little girl came running barefoot across the packed earth, her hands cupped gently around something fragile. She opened them with pride, revealing a butterfly whose wings blazed orange and black against her fingers. Elizabeth's breath caught at the sight. "Be gentle, Mija," she whispered, slipping into the Spanish that had become as natural as her own breath. "She wants to fly." Maria's small hands opened wider, and the butterfly rose into the air, catching the light as it drifted upward, free. Elizabeth watched it go, her chest tightening. 5 years ago, she too had opened her hands and let her old life drift away, learning in its absence what it truly meant to choose freedom over the prison of expectation. "Senora Santos?" A voice called from the front gate. Elizabeth straightened, her heart quickening. A man stood there, his coat dusty from travel, his hat held respectfully in one hand. He carried himself like someone in used to labor, his skin pale in the desert sun, his gaze steady but searching. "I am looking for Elizabeth Harrison," he said carefully. The name struck her like a stone. Harrison. She had not heard it spoken aloud in 5 years. Here, she was Elizabeth Santos, wife, mother, gardener. That other name belonged to another life, one she had buried in the canyon of memory. "Who is asking?" she replied, brushing the dirt from her skirt. The man removed his hat, revealing thinning hair and spectacles that caught the morning light. "Thomas Whitmore," he said softly. The world tilted. Thomas Whitmore, the man who had once stood waiting at an altar she would never reach, dressed in wedding clothes while she rode into the desert, chasing love instead of duty. "I see you remember me," Thomas said with a sad, tender smile. "Though I confess, I might not have recognized you. You look different, happy." Before Elizabeth could answer, Miguel appeared in the doorway, wiping flour from his hands. His eyes took in the stranger with quiet calculation, not possessive but protective. He moved to Elizabeth's side, his presence solid as stone. "This is Thomas Whitmore," Elizabeth said softly. "The man I was meant to marry." Miguel's gaze did not waver. There was no jealousy there, only an understanding born of years together. He had always known the past might come knocking. "Senor Whitmore," Miguel said evenly, "you are welcome here. Will you take water? Coffee?" Thomas nodded his thanks, though his eyes kept drifting to Elizabeth, to the children who now peeked curiously around Miguel's legs, to the humble garden that seemed to pulse with life. Whatever he had expected to find here, it was not this. "I bring news," he said finally, "from your family." Elizabeth's breath caught. "Are they well?" "Your father is well enough. Still governor, though older, and he speaks often of retirement. But your mother," his voice faltered. "She's been very ill. The doctors say her heart is weak, but those who know her believe it is sorrow that has made her sick. A sadness no medicine can heal." Elizabeth felt the earth tilt beneath her. All these years she had imagined her mother angry, perhaps relieved, perhaps hardened against the daughter who had brought such scandal. But sorrow? Heartbreak? That she had not dared to imagine. "How ill?" she whispered. Thomas's eyes softened. "She may not see another winter. Your father asked me to find you, to ask if you would return. Not to stay, but to see her, to make peace before it is too late." Elizabeth's gaze fell to her garden, the herbs Miguel's grandmother had planted, the pepper she had tended season after season. This was home now. Yet home was not only earth and walls. It was also blood, memory, and bonds that even silence could not sever. "I cannot leave my children," she said, her voice breaking. Thomas shook his head gently. "Nor should you. Bring them. Bring your husband. Your father has changed, Elizabeth. Losing you taught him more about love than politics ever did. He will welcome you." Elizabeth turned to Miguel, her anchor. His hand found hers steady warm. She searched his face, waiting. "I think," he said slowly in Spanish, "that some wounds cannot heal in shadows. They need sunlight, and our children deserve to know where they come from." William toddled forward then, tugging at her skirt, his wide eyes fixed on the stranger. "Mama, ¿quién es?" Elizabeth knelt, her throat tight. "He is family," she said at last. "Family we have not seen in a long time." That night, after Thomas had shared their meal and told her stories of the world she had left behind, Elizabeth sat down at her wooden table with pen in hand. 4 or 5 years, she had written letters she never sent, but tonight her words burned with courage. "My dearest Mama," she began, her hand trembling. "I have thought of you every day. I have written 100 letters, but never had the strength to send them. Today, I choose courage. I want you to meet your grandchildren. I want you to see that the love I chose has grown into something beautiful. Not perfect, but true." Miguel's laughter drifted from the other room, where he told Maria and William's story about a princess who traded her crown for a garden. Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears as she wrote on. "Love, I have learned, is not about castles or crowns, but about tending the same soil day after day until something new and living grows. I hope you will see this, Mama. I hope you will forgive me. I hope we can still find each other." Outside, the desert stars stretched endlessly across the sky, and a night bird called to its mate. Elizabeth folded the letter, sealing it with hands that trembled but no longer with fear. This one she would not hide in the wooden box. This one she would send. In the morning, as the mail coach rattled down the dusty road, Elizabeth placed the envelope in the driver's hands. For the first time in 5 years, she chose not to hide, but to trust love, forgiveness, and the belief that even broken families could be mended. And as the coach disappeared into the horizon, carrying her words like a fragile prayer, Elizabeth turned back toward the little house where her children played and her husband waited. Her heart, once divided between 2 worlds, now beat steady with hope. For the first time, she truly believed that love, patient, enduring, courageous, had the power to heal everything. So that's the story for today. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. On a scale of 10 to 0, how would you rate this story? And let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to know. We'll see you in the next video. Until then, stay happy and take care.